Her own husband sold her body like a gambling chip. Drake Winters didn't just betray Catherine. He dragged her into the mud of his debts, treating her not as a wife, but as a piece of meat to be thrown on the table. In their bedroom, the room that once held promises of marriage, he shoved her down, his breath thick with whiskey. "You ain't my wife tonight," he hissed. "You're my payment. You'll settle my debt." The door swung open. Mason Thorne stepped inside, his grin crooked beneath a long scar that twisted down his face like a snake. The stench of liquor and gunpowder filled the air as he yanked Catherine by the hair, ripping away the last strip of fabric that clung to her dignity. Her tears didn't fall. They froze in her eyes, trapped by shock. "She's prettier than you described, Drake." Mason's voice scraped like boots on gravel. "Worth every cent you owe." Drake backed toward the door, avoiding Catherine's eyes. "We're square after tonight?" Mason nodded, his eyes never leaving Catherine. "Go drink yourself stupid. I'll be a while." When the door closed, leaving her alone with the devil, Catherine felt something inside her snap like a dry branch. She was treated like livestock, handed over without mercy. The walls closed in with the smell of smoke and sweat. Every sound sharpened into cruelty as Mason's voice pressed against her face. "You're mine now, paid for and owned." But fate left her one weapon near the fireplace. An iron poker leaned against the stone. Its metal gleamed faintly in the dim light, promising either salvation or damnation. Her hand shot out. Her scream tore through the air as she swung with all the desperation left in her soul. The crack echoed like thunder. Blood sprayed across the white sheets, hot and wild. Mason's body dropped to the floor, twitching once before falling still. The sickening sound of fracturing bone lingered in the air like a ghost. Catherine froze, chest heaving, iron slick with blood in her grip. Had she killed him? The poker fell from her trembling fingers. She didn't know. She didn't wait. Panic ripped through her body. She stumbled for the door, naked, trembling, clutching nothing but a splintered board from a broken crate to cover herself. The desert night greeted her like a blade. Cold winds slashed against bare skin, and stones and thorns tore her feet until blood traced every step. Still, she ran. Behind her, the house burned in her memory. A husband who betrayed her, a stranger who tried to break her. A pool of blood that might belong to a corpse. She didn't look back. To look back meant death. She ran across miles of sand and rock, body breaking, lungs burning. Her breath came ragged, her mind spinning with the pounding of her heart. At last, she collapsed near a dry stone well on the edge of a lonely ranch. Through blurred vision, she saw a man. Broad shoulders, gray at the temples, the weathered face of someone who had seen more winters than joy. She scrambled backward, pressing the wooden board to her chest, her voice breaking into a scream. Don't touch me." The man didn't move, didn't speak right away. He simply pulled the duster coat from his own back and draped it over her shaking shoulders. "Name's Jacob Reeves." His voice came low, steady, the kind of voice that carried through gunfire and storms. "Ain't nobody hurting you no more on my land." In that moment, Catherine's world shifted. The night didn't feel so cruel. The desert didn't feel so endless. But the question clawed at her chest. Had she truly killed a man back in that room? Or was someone already on her trail, ready to drag her back into hell? Jacob Reeves had seen the worst men could do to each other. Antietam Creek, 1862. The single bloodiest day in American history. Bodies stacked like cordwood. The smell of black powder and iron. The screams of men calling for their mothers. He'd pulled young Michael Donovan from that hell. The boy had a rebel bullet in his gut, his blood turning the creek water pink. Jacob had carried him 3 miles to the field hospital, both of them painted red. They'd never spoken of it after. Some debts could only be acknowledged in silence. Now, 13 years later, Jacob studied the woman trembling before him. He recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in the mirror every morning since the war. The look of someone who'd crossed a line they never thought they would. The ranch house was quiet that night. The kind of quiet where you could hear the fire crackle and the coyotes sing somewhere far off. Catherine lay on a small cot, Jacob's duster still hanging loose on her shoulders. For the first time in days, her body wasn't running, but her mind was still racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the poker swing down, saw the blood splash across the wall. In the dark, her chest heaved, and she sat bolt upright, her hands grabbing at the blanket, eyes wide, breath broken. I killed him. I killed him. God forgive me. The cry shattered the silence of the old house. The tin cup by her bed rattled and spilled, water soaking into the floorboards. Jacob stepped in from the other room. He didn't rush. He didn't scold. He just stood there for a moment, the firelight drawing hard lines on his weathered face. Catherine's words tumbled out like stones rolling down a hill. I didn't mean to. I just wanted him off me. There was blood everywhere. Too much blood. I can't remember if he moved. I can't remember if he breathed. Did I kill him? Did I? Her sobs came hard, shaking her small frame. She buried her face in her hands, waiting for judgment, waiting for the weight of condemnation. But Jacob didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw Bible verses or call her a sinner. He knelt down slow, steady, until his eyes were level with hers. I've seen men die. I've put men in the ground. His eyes never wavered. And I've learned one thing. Sometimes surviving don't make you guilty. Catherine blinked through her tears, stunned by the calm in his voice. He wasn't excusing her, but he wasn't condemning her either. His words settled over her like a blanket warmer than the coat she wore. Outside, the desert night deepened. Inside, the soft glow of a kerosene lamp washed over her face, showing a young woman caught between horror and relief. What if he's still alive out there? She whispered, almost too soft to hear. What if he comes for me? Jacob's gaze didn't waver. Then you ain't facing him alone. The words hung heavy, carrying more promise than she could understand in that moment. Her tears slowed, and for the first time since she fled, her body leaned into the silence instead of fighting it. The Lone River Ranch wasn't much to look at, but it was a fortress in its own right. The main house stood 2 stories tall, built from pine logs thick enough to stop most bullets. A barn that could shelter 20 horses stood to the east, while a bunkhouse, empty now since Jacob let the last of his hands go, squatted to the west. The corral held 8 horses, all quarter horses bred for working cattle. Behind the house, a smokehouse, root cellar, and tool shed completed the compound. A deep well provided water even in the driest months. 200 head of cattle grazed on 1,000 acres of scrubland. It wasn't paradise, but it was something a man could defend. And Jacob Reeves knew all about defense. He'd built the ranch with defense in mind. Gun ports disguised as decorative elements. Sight lines cleared for 300 yards in every direction. Ammunition and weapons stored in every building. A man who'd survived Antietam didn't leave survival to chance. Dawn came harsh and golden over the eastern ridge. Catherine stood on the porch, watching Jacob check the horses. He moved with the economy of a man who never wasted emotion. Each gesture precise, deliberate. You need to learn to shoot, he said without turning, and ride, and build fire without matches. Catherine stepped off the porch, her borrowed boots too large on her feet. Why would you teach me these things? Now Jacob turned. The morning light cut across his face, illuminating a scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw. Because the desert don't forgive the unprepared, and neither do men like the one you ran from. That day he placed a Colt Army revolver in her hands, showed her how to load the 5 chambers, leaving the hammer resting on the empty sixth. Taught her to squeeze, not pull, to breathe between shots, to aim for the center mass, not the head. Her first shot missed the bottle he'd set up 50 yards away. Her fifth shot shattered it. "You're a natural," he said, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen on his face. The days blurred together. Catherine learned to saddle a horse, to ride with her heels down and back straight. She learned to start a fire with flint and steel, to dress game, to read tracks in the dust. She learned that Jacob never spoke of his wife and daughter, whose photographs sat on the mantel but whose names never crossed his lips. She learned that nightmares visited him too, in the dark hours before dawn. On the seventh day, dust rose on the horizon, 3 riders approaching fast from the direction of town. Jacob's hand moved to the Colt on his hip. "Inside, now." Catherine didn't argue. She grabbed the Winchester repeater from beside the door and took position at the window, just as Jacob had taught her. The riders pulled up 20 yards from the house. Drake Winters sat on the center horse, flanked by 2 men Catherine didn't recognize. Hard men with sun-leathered faces and guns worn low on their hips. "Reeves!" Drake called out. "I know she's in there. Send out my wife." Jacob stepped onto the porch, thumbs hooked in his belt, body angled to make a smaller target. "Ain't no man's wife here, just a free woman making her own way." Drake spat into the dust. "That's my property you're harboring." "A woman ain't property." Jacob's voice remained level, but Catherine saw his right hand drift closer to his holster. "Not in my experience." "You don't want this fight, old man," Drake sneered. 3 guns against 1? What happened next occurred so fast Catherine barely registered it. Jacob's hand blurred. The Colt appeared as if by magic. The report cracked across the yard before Drake's men could clear leather. The man on the right tumbled from his saddle, a red flower blooming on his chest. "2 guns," Jacob corrected, his weapon now trained on Drake. "And I've killed more men than you've cheated at cards." Drake's face drained of color. His remaining companion looked uncertain, hand frozen halfway to his holster. "You're dead, Reeves." Drake jerked his horse around. "You hear me? Dead. I know people, real people with real power." Jacob didn't respond. He stood motionless until the riders disappeared in a cloud of dust. Only then did his shoulders drop slightly. That night, Catherine found him cleaning his Colt by the fire. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked. Jacob didn't look up. "War teaches a man to kill or die. I chose not to die." "The war's been over for 10 years. Now he raised his eyes. "Not in here." He tapped his temple. "Never in here." Sheriff Michael Donovan was younger than Catherine expected, not yet 40, with a face that would have been handsome if not for the worry lines etched around his eyes. He rode alone to Lone River Ranch 3 days after Drake's visit, his badge catching the midday sun. Jacob met him in the yard, tension visible in his stance until he recognized the rider. "Michael." Jacob nodded. "Been a while." The sheriff dismounted, wincing slightly as his right leg took his weight. "An old wound," Catherine guessed. "A rebel bullet at Antietam, perhaps." "Jacob." Michael removed his hat. "Wish this was a social call." They spoke in low voices that didn't carry to where Catherine watched from the porch. She saw Michael hand Jacob a piece of paper, saw Jacob's face harden as he read it. When Jacob beckoned her over, dread pooled in her stomach. "Miss Winters," the sheriff nodded respectfully, "I should be arresting you right now. Your husband's filed charges. Says you attacked a man named Mason Thorne, left him for dead." Catherine's legs nearly gave out. "Is he dead?" Michael shook his head. "No, but he's wearing your mark. That poker crushed his cheekbone, took his left eye. He's been asking all over town about you." Relief and terror battled within her. Relief that she wasn't a murderer. terror that Mason Thorne was alive and hunting her. "Then why aren't you arresting me?" she managed. Michael glanced at Jacob. "Because Jacob Reeves pulled me out of a meat grinder at Antietam when everyone else had written me off. Because I owe him my life." He turned back to Catherine. "And because I know Mason Thorne, he's Red River Gang, most vicious outfit in 3 territories. Your husband knew exactly what he was doing when he handed you over." "Red River Gang." Jacob's voice had gone flat. "Dangerous." Michael nodded. "Thorne's their new lieutenant well, since what happened to your family, Jacob." Catherine looked between them, sensing a current of meaning she couldn't grasp. "They've got half the town in their pocket now," Michael continued, "including my deputy. I can stall the warrant, but not for long. And when Thorne finds out where you are—" He let the implication hang. "Let him come," Jacob said quietly. Michael's face darkened. "He won't come alone. Not this time." That night, unable to sleep, Catherine found an old trunk in the spare room. Inside, beneath folded uniforms and letters tied with faded ribbon, she discovered a journal. Jacob's journal from after the war. She knew she shouldn't read it, knew it was a violation of the privacy of a man who had shown her nothing but decency, but fear and curiosity proved stronger than propriety. By lamplight, she read of Jacob's return from war, of the wife and daughter who had waited for him, of his recruitment into the U.S. Marshals to hunt down the gangs terrorizing the frontier, of the day he'd tracked Red River Gang to their hideout, and of the day he returned from that mission to find his home burned to the ground, his wife and 6-year-old daughter inside, a Red River bandana nailed to the charred door. Mason Thorne's name appeared throughout the later entries. The man who had given the order, the man Jacob had hunted for 2 years before giving up and retreating to Lone River Ranch, the man whose face she had crushed with an iron poker. When she closed the journal, Jacob stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the shadows. "Now you know," he said simply. Catherine's throat tightened. "He killed your family. And now he wants to kill you." Jacob stepped into the room. "But there's something you don't understand yet. He doesn't just want you dead. He wants me to watch it happen." They spent the next day preparing for war. Jacob moved with the focus of a man who had done this before. He distributed weapons to defensive positions throughout the ranch. The Winchester repeater went to Catherine, along with 2 boxes of .44-40 cartridges. Jacob carried his Cold Army, a shotgun, and a wicked-looking Arkansas toothpick knife in his boot. Michael Donovan arrived before sunset with news that chilled Catherine's blood. 12 riders, he reported, checking the loads in his peacemaker. "Thorne, your husband, and 10 of the meanest killers in the territory. They've been drinking, boasting about what they'll do when they get here." Jacob nodded, unsurprised. "When?" "Tonight, full moon. They want to see what they're doing." Catherine felt the fear rise like bile. "I should go. This isn't your fight." Jacob turned to her, his eyes harder than she'd ever seen them. "It's been my fight for 5 years, since they took my Sarah and little Emma." His voice didn't break, but something in it shifted. "I buried what was left of them with these hands. Walked away because I couldn't take on the whole gang alone." He checked the action on his shotgun. "I ain't walking away this time." Michael positioned himself at the north gate, where the main trail approached the ranch. Jacob took the barn, with clear sight lines to the house and bunkhouse. Catherine remained in the main house, the Winchester at her shoulder, watching the southern approach. Night fell like a curtain. The moon rose, casting silver light across the yard. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the waiting. "They're coming!" Michael's voice carried softly through the yard. "I count 10, no, 12 riders." Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were slick with sweat on the rifle. Through the window, she saw them emerge from the darkness. Riders in a loose formation, Mason Thorne at their center. Even at a distance, she could make out the bandage covering the left side of his face. Beside him rode Drake, looking small and uncertain. "Send out the woman!" Mason's voice boomed across the open space. "Send her out now, and the rest of you can ride away." No one answered. "Reeves," Mason tried again. "I know you're in there. You think I don't recognize your handiwork? Setting up another woman to fight your battles?" Still silence. Mason turned to his men. "Burn it all. Kill everyone inside." The night erupted into chaos. Gunfire shattered the stillness as Red River riders charged the ranch. Michael's rifle barked from his position, dropping the lead rider. Jacob's shotgun roared from the barn, the heavy buckshot tearing through a second attacker. Catherine squeezed the Winchester's trigger, just as Jacob had taught her. Breathed, aimed, fired. A rider tumbled from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The air filled with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Bullets splintered wood around her. She ducked, moved to another window, fired again. Outside, she heard Mason shouting orders. "Flank the barn! Burn it!" A flaming arrow arced through the night, landing on the barn roof. Another followed. Another. Soon the dry wood caught. Fire spread with terrifying speed. Catherine saw Jacob run from the blazing structure, firing as he moved toward the house. A bullet caught him in the leg. He stumbled but kept moving. Drake, separated from the main group, found himself pinned down behind a water trough. He looked up to see Mason watching him, a cruel smile visible even in the chaotic light. "Thorne!" Drake called out. "Help me!" Mason's response was a single shot. Drake fell back, a red stain spreading across his chest. His eyes found Catherine in the window, widened with the sudden understanding of betrayal. "He's burning everything," Drake gasped, loud enough for her to hear. "The house! Next!" More flaming arrows hit the main house. The roof caught. Smoke began to fill the upper floor. Catherine ran downstairs, meeting Jacob at the door. "Ammunition shed," he grimaced, blood soaking his pant leg. "Only place they won't burn." Together they made a desperate dash across the yard. Bullets kicked up dust at their feet. Michael provided covering fire from his position, but he was outnumbered. A shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. They reached the stone ammunition shed as the main house erupted into flames. Inside, Jacob collapsed against a crate, his face gray with pain. Catherine tore a strip from her shirt, bound his wound tightly. "You should have let me go," she whispered. "None of this would have happened." Jacob's laugh was more cough than humor. "They killed my family 5 years ago. This was always coming." He checked his Colt. 2 rounds left. "But at least you gave me the chance to face it standing." The shed door splintered inward. Mason Thorne stood silhouetted against the burning ranch. The bandage had fallen away, revealing the ruin of his left eye socket. The scar Catherine had given him ran from forehead to jaw, puckered and angry. "Found you," he grinned, raising his pistol. "The woman who marked me and the man who should have died with his family." Jacob lurched upward, putting himself between Mason and Catherine. "It's me you want, Thorne. Let her go." Mason's laugh was the sound of breaking glass. "No, I want you to watch her die, just like I made you watch your house burn, knowing your wife and child were inside." He aimed at Catherine. Jacob lunged forward, a final desperate move. The shot echoed in the small space. Jacob fell back, blood blooming on his chest. Catherine screamed, a sound of pure rage. She grabbed Jacob's fallen Colt, raised it as Mason turned to her. Everything Jacob had taught her crystallized in that moment. Breathe, aim, squeeze. The first bullet caught Mason in the right shoulder, spinning him. The second hit center mass. He staggered backward, disbelief spreading across his ruined face. He tried to raise his gun again. Catherine fired the shotgun Jacob had dropped. At close range, the blast lifted Mason off his feet and threw him through the doorway. Outside, the shooting had stopped. The surviving Red River riders, seeing their leader fall, had lost their appetite for battle. They retreated into the darkness, leaving their dead behind. Michael Donovan, bleeding but alive, staggered to the ammunition shed. Together, he and Catherine carried Jacob to what remained of the bunkhouse, the only structure not yet fully engulfed. Jacob's eyes fluttered open as they laid him on a cot. "Did we win?" he whispered. Catherine took his hand. "We survived. That's winning enough." 1 year later, the rebuilt Lone River Ranch stood proud against the horizon. New barn, new main house, new beginning. Catherine Reeves, no longer Winters, stood on the porch, a Winchester rifle comfortable in her hands as she surveyed the land. Behind her, Jacob emerged from the house, walking with a slight limp, but otherwise recovered from his wounds. Drake had died that night, but not before signing a confession that cleared Catherine of all charges. Mason Thorne was buried in an unmarked grave behind the ranch, along with his ambitions and cruelty. Sheriff Michael Donovan rode out regularly, bringing news from town and staying for supper. The Red River Gang had dissolved after that night, their power broken, their remnants scattered to the wind. Jacob handed Catherine a folded document. She opened it to find a deed, half the ranch now in her name. "Partners," he said simply. They stood side by side, watching the sunset paint the desert gold and crimson. Not as husband and wife. Those wounds were still too fresh for both of them. But as equals, as survivors. "Sometimes," Jacob said quietly, "the road to freedom runs through fire." Catherine nodded, feeling the weight of the gun on her hip, the deed in her hand, the scars on her soul. "And sometime," she replied, "the worst scars are the ones you can't see." Together they watched the day end and another begin, standing tall in a land that forgave nothing but respected strength. They had earned their place in it, paid for in blood and fire, and that was enough.